So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen with you. And I'm really excited. Like I said, this is my favorite part of my week. And having the opportunity to share Ivy with you all is just amazing. So can everybody see my screen okay? Yep. Okay, perfect. So Ivy, there are a couple different components. So first of all, Ivy is a project-based system. So you can access it from anywhere because it is cloud-based, but everything that you do within Ivy will kind of live and die within the project itself. And that's what we're going to cover today. The recommended workflows for your projects. So one thing that I want to start with is telling you that you should always plan to start a project with a proposal. The proposal is really your opportunity to ideate and to make edits and adjustments, and that is really the place that you should start. But even pre-proposal, I want to go back to the beginning. I want to start with sourcing. So what I'm going to do here is actually utilize the Ivy Clipper, because there's one key component here that I think is really important that I want to make sure that you know about. And that is something called draft items. So what I am doing here, I'm on one of my favorite vendors' websites, and I found these baskets that I want to present to my client. And what I'm going to do here is activate the Ivy Clipper. The Ivy Clipper is a Google Chrome extension. It lives in your browser. So you can just access it on any website. And I want to clip all the different components here. And there's a method to the madness. The reason why I'm starting with this is because I want to show you draft items and how they will come into effect. So the first thing I'm going to do is clip the image. All I need to do is click the hand and click on the image and take the title, categorize this, add my cost. If you have a default markup, you could just set it right here or use the calculator to create your target price. Select your vendor from your vendor list in Ivy and add your description. And what I'm going to do here is actually add this directly to my project so that this is added as a draft item. It's added both to our product library in Ivy, and it will also be added directly to my project. So what I want to do is go back into Ivy now. And of course, the first step in any practices is to create a project. I'm not going to do that, but if you wanted to, all you need to do is click Add New right over here. And I'm simply going to go directly into my project, my CP remodel project. I'll click on the Proposals tab and create a new proposal. Now remember, what we're talking about here is best practices for your Ivy account. And the reason why you always want to start with a proposal is because the proposal is not an official billing document. It gives you the ability to mess around, communicate with your client, say yes or no before actually declaring any income. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about creating invoices. But it's really important that you want to start with a proposal when the items are still adjusted, when you're selling product and you don't know the cost, the final cost, you don't know the shipping, you don't necessarily know the taxes. We will talk about when you want to start with an invoice, but that will be a little bit later. So what I'm going to do here is I'm creating a new proposal. I have my draft items right over here on the side, and I will click on the basket. And it's added directly to my proposal. I have the ability to make any edits that I need to if I need to add my title, my description, but I can see that my cost and my markup are set. If you have an estimated shipping cost, or if you have an idea of what shipping generally costs, you can add it here. But one thing about the best practices that we want to talk about is a lot of designers will usually estimate the shipping costs, even if they don't know it yet, just so that when it comes time to issuing a final invoice to their client isn't shocked by the thousands of dollars in shipping that you need to collect. Because a lot of designers will collect shipping and tax at final invoice, and that number can be overwhelming sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to estimate some shipping right over here, mark the item as taxable, and assign it to a room. And the rooms are really, really important. They're not just, these pretty labels for you to say where an item goes. The room tags actually enable you to essentially create a budget per room in the project tracker. So you always want to be able to identify this. And this is where it comes into play. If you ever need to create a room and you don't have it, you could just add one on the spot right over here. What I'm going to do here is add a couple of items, all from, some of my favorite vendors. Once again, I'm going to add some shipping costs right over here. If you add a markup, you can do that as well for your shipping. And once again, I'm going to assign these to my different rooms. And one thing that I want to mention that's going to be really important here is document tags. You should absolutely utilize document tags. Document tags here are client-facing and internal facing. But what's important about them is sometimes, one of the complaints that I hear is people will say, I have a list of 1 million proposals in my project. It's really hard for me to identify what belongs to what or what contains what. This is one way that will allow you to identify that really easily. So I can call this product proposal and simply click enter, and it will create a document tag. And this document tag will also be visible to your client on their dashboard. So it allows them to easily identify using the different tags. So definitely take advantage of these tags right over here. Again, you can customize any details here. If there's a different tax percentage, you'll see that the shipping cost is calculated for the entire document. And you'll also be able to see a little eyeball down here. You can click on it and see a little breakdown of what your cost, your markup, and your shipping costs are. This is all internal, so your client will not see this. And one thing that I want to talk about is how important it is to collect a deposit on a proposal. And this is part of how to set yourself up for success on Ivy. It's all about protecting yourself. You need to collect money up front, and that has to happen on the proposal phase. Of course, you can always send your proposals out for approval only. A lot of designers do that, but I'm talking about what I think are best practices here. And one of them is taking a deposit on proposals, because you never want to pay out of pocket for any sorts of furniture products. You never want to front that money for your clients. We hear all too often horror stories from designers talking about, my client went AWOL and she owes me $10,000 and I already paid that out of pocket to my vendor. Now what do I do? Well, that sucks. You really want to protect yourself. So the best way to do that is by taking advantage of the fact that Ivy allows you to take deposits on proposals and take that proposal deposit up front. I personally would recommend taking 100% up front, period. Because again, this proposal is an estimate. Everything here is subject to change. These are estimated shipping costs. These are estimated tax costs. We won't actually know what the cost is from our vendor until we receive that final cost from our vendor. So collect 100% up front, or if there's a specific dollar amount that you've agreed on with your client, simply select the $ sign and request that amount. However, and I'll show you why, I'm going to request 100% deposit upfront. Okay, so let me zoom out here. And I will click save. So to recap, 2 things that we are starting with. Utilize draft items. When you're clipping items using the clipper, or when you're adding items from your product library or into your product library, always make sure to utilize draft items. It'll really save you a lot of time. And you also want to make sure to utilize deposit payments, room tags, and document tags. So just to recap what we've covered so far in this proposal phase. Okay, so as you may or may not know, with this proposal, I could do a couple of things. In this case, I simply want to give myself the ability to approve per line item. This will allow my client to say yes or no to each item individually. And when we're talking about best practices, the reason why I say collect 100% deposit upfront on this proposal is because when you send this over to your client and they click decline, you'll see that your deposit amount is still 100% of the remaining balance. So that's where it's really important. This is where you want to make it really clear to your client, you're paying a deposit for everything upfront. Okay. So again, start with the proposal, get that money, protect yourself. Here, I'm going to simply record a payment. Once you send it to your client, of course, you could take online payment. In this case, I'm simply going to pretend that I received a check payment for my client for the full amount. And I'm recording this payment right here, sending a receipt, and clicking create payment. So again, what we're doing here is we're talking about best practices and how to set yourself up for success. Once you collect this deposit payment, you have that money in your bank, you have this money ready to go, and now you're ready to place your order. So the next step that I would recommend doing from proposals is creating your purchase orders. And we're gonna get into this in just a second, but one question that a lot of designers will ask is, do I need to create a PO if I'm buying from Wayfair or Restoration Hardware or some other retail vendor that doesn't actually accept POs? Absolutely. Absolutely, you need to be creating POs. The key here is that you do not need to send these POs to your vendors. These POs are simply a record of money out. You get money in on the invoice and the proposal and money out on the PO. So even if you're not sending your POs to your vendors, it's absolutely essential that you are making those POs so that you have an understanding of what your bottom line is, what you're doing, income out or income in, and what you're paying in expenses. So absolutely create a PO. And one reason that we're starting with the proposal phase here is because we can connect our proposal directly to our PO and our proposal directly to our invoice. So it's really important. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of about linked documents in just a second here. But this is why we're starting here on the proposal phase. So what I want to do from the proposal, I've collected that payment. And I need to click on the 3 dots over here and simply click on create purchase orders. And you'll see here a couple of things. I can transfer over my shipping when I create a PO, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Again, it's the estimated cost here, but I'm sure I'm going to get the final cost from my vendor. So I just want to have that here. And you'll see that my vendors are automatically associated with these items from when I originally added these items to my product library, whether through the clipper or manually. So I'm going to get 2 different POs from this proposal. I'll get one for Leloy and one for the Citizenry. Again, the Citizenry is a retail vendor. I would purchase from them online. I would never send this PO to the citizenry, but it's important for me to track where my money has gone. If I collected the cost of these items from the citizenry plus markup, I need to understand how much I'm paying to my vendor for the unit cost. So you'll see this PO right over here. And at the top, one thing that you'll notice is now there's a little chain link icon right over here. And when I click on it, I can see exactly the proposal that it came from and the status of that proposal. And this is really important. We want the life cycle of a product to be reflected from when you spec'd it to when your client paid for it to when you paid your vendor for it. We want everything to be uniform. And in the project tracker, using connected documents will allow you to see one item in its life cycle across the entire project. And utilizing connected documents is a way to do that. So again, the citizenry, this is my PO. I have my unit cost, and I also have my shipping costs. If I send this to my vendor, or if I pay for my items online and I find out that I have a different shipping cost, I can edit it, no problem. And one best practice that I would recommend doing on any PO that you are using is utilizing this attachment section down here, because this will allow you to keep your record straight. Whether you are actually sending this PO directly to your vendor, or whether you've purchased something online, upload the receipt or the vendor invoice that you receive to this attachment section on your PO, so that everything relating to these items, your actual receipt of the purchase and your own internal record, you want to make sure everything lines up exactly. And you also want to just centralize everything. You don't want to be accessing screenshots on your phone or receipts in your emails. Take advantage of the fact that Ivy centralizes your workflow and upload your attachment here. So I'm simply going to upload a receipt that I have right over here. And you'll now see that this attachment will live within the project, and more importantly, it will live within this purchase order. And because the citizenry is a retail vendor, I'm never going to send them this PO. It's all about my records. It's all about me staying on top of, did I pay for these items? What's the status of them? I'm going to record a payment right over here by clicking on Make a Payment. I can toggle over to record a payment and select my payment method. So let's say I paid them with my credit card online. I can add my reference number, my order confirmation number, whatever it is that I have, and create my payment. So to recap, start with the proposal, create your purchase orders, even if you're not sending them to your vendors, and record your payments. You can also upload your attachments, which will be your vendor invoice, your receipt. Keep everything centralized and make sure that what you paid on that invoice or on that receipt exactly matches your PO. All right. So hypothetically speaking, let's go back to the other PO that I made, the one that I actually want to send to Loloy, because I have a rep who works with POs here. So let's say I contact my rep and they come back and they say, okay, so shipping here is actually going to cost $120. And to confirm, the rug in this size is $3,557. Okay, no problem. I'm going to go back here and edit. And I'm going to edit the cost of this rug, edit my shipping cost. And my rep also tells me it's a 6-week shipping time. I'm going to go ahead and add my estimated shipping date right over here. This This is our room tag. And the room tag is important. Once again, it'll allow you to just understand what items belong to what rooms, especially when you go into the project tracker. But this is also your opportunity to add your side mark. So I'm going to call this Jones and side chair rug. I'll make my side mark right over here and save it. Once I've had this PO updated with all of the correct information, I have my side mark, I have my estimated ship date, the actual cost, and the shipping. I could send it directly to my rep by email. I can BCC myself if I need to, and add my message. And this will send my rep the purchase order as a PDF attachment. It includes an image and all the information that you saw in before we just clicked send. Once again, as soon as I get that vendor invoice or if I had already received my vendor invoice, which is how I knew that the price was actually different, I can attach it right over here and keep my record straight. Record that payment manually, send a payment. If you are working with an IV purchasing agent, you want to pay them online, simply make a payment here. In this case, once again, I'm going to record the payment that I hypothetically made to Loloy, just like that. And now what happens? Now we've paid our vendor a total of $57 more for the unit cost than what we originally requested from our client. And we also paid an additional $40 in shipping. So now this is where it's really important, like I said, to start with the proposal. You always want to make sure that you are working the proposal, because the proposal is a document that you can manipulate. And the invoice is not necessarily an item, is a document that you want to continuously change. When you create an invoice, you want it to be kind of final, which is why we haven't even gotten to the invoicing phase yet. Again, this is just for product ordering. This is my recommended workflow. I received that cost from Loloy. I'm going to go back to my proposal. And look at how easy it is. I'm utilizing my connected document up here, clicking on proposal. And even though this proposal has been paid, I can go ahead and edit it. I can always edit my proposal, no problem. And remember what we said, we wanted to bill our client for the difference in shipping and for the difference in the unit cost from what we receive from our vendor. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to edit my unit cost, and I'm going to update my shipping cost right over here and click save. So now while our proposal is saving, even though we had already collected a payment for $5,776, the changes that we just made to this proposal have resulted in a balance due on this proposal. So at this point, one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, is I've seen a lot of designers utilize this memo section in the way that I have essentially tried to utilize it, where I say shipping and tax to be collected at final invoice. But you can also use this memo section to say, you know, all costs are subject to change, whatever it is. But this is where you would be able to either reissue this proposal if you still have a couple more things that you need to add, that you need your client's approval on. You can always reissue the same proposal to your client. But let's say this is pretty final. I already placed the order. We got the final cost. I'm ready to collect this final payment from my client. This is the point at which I'm going to create an invoice. All I need to do here is click Start Invoice. And while I'm doing this, one thing I want to mention is You can progressively invoice on Ivy right now. So if you need to invoice for one item at a time, you can certainly do that. Make sure to check our help center for articles on how to do that. And I do also want to let you know that we are making improvements as we speak to that, and they should be rolled out in the next few weeks on progressive invoicing, which I'm really excited about. So I don't want to go too much into it because we are updating it. All right, so again, to recap, proposal, PO, proposal, invoice. That's where I am right now. I am on my invoice. I am ready to collect my final payment from my client. And what's great about collecting a payment on a proposal is that payment will transfer over to the invoice. It will carry over. And if you're connected to QuickBooks Online, you might say, hey, QuickBooks doesn't allow me to take payments on estimates. Where does that payment go? Well, the payment sits in a liability account as unapplied income or as an unapplied liability. And then as soon as you convert this proposal to an invoice in Ivy, that payment will also be applied to the invoice of QuickBooks. So the payment will always transfer over from proposal to invoice. And you'll see right down here, you can even verify the amount that you've already received. And if I have any additional changes I need to make here, we already modified the unit cost, we modified the shipping cost. Let's say I now know taxes, whatever it is, I can always, whatever I want to collect right now, I'm going to do so and click save. And what do we see here? We see this linked document. We see this little chain link. And when I click on it, this is the importance of linked documents. It will keep everything in one place. You always want to start with that proposal. So I see that I have a proposal that's been invoiced, and I see my two POs that it's connected to right over here. Once again, I have that final balance, and I can send this back to my client and say, hey, Dana and John, here's your invoice for the final payment. And of course, request to take that payment online. When I go ahead and preview what it looks like on my client's side, you'll see that they can also see what's already been paid here and simply pay the remaining balance. Okay? Does that sound good so far? Setting yourself up for success. Start with a proposal, utilize draft items, take a deposit on a proposal, create POs no matter what, and create your invoice only when you're ready to collect that final payment. To go back to invoices, what is an invoice? An invoice is an official document of income. This is your declaration to the state and to the federal government that you are collecting payment. And what's so important about invoices is you want to make sure that you're ready to invoice when it's finalized for you. An invoice is not a document that you want to edit and manipulate, especially after it's been paid, because then you can run into some issues. If you collected a payment in one quarter and already paid taxes on it, and then you go back into that invoice 3 months later in a different quarter and manipulate it, it's going to be a little bit wonky. Like, you don't want to do that. That's not a good practice. You want to create an invoice only when everything is finalized and when you are super ready to collect it. And for that reason, I want to share some tips that I've received from different designers. Some designers will only create an invoice at installation, at the very end of a project. Once everything has been ironed out, all of the prices are final, everything's been installed, nothing yet is going to be out of stock or returned or collected payment on. It's simply finalized. They will just issue the invoice at the very end. Other times, designers will create the invoice once an item's been placed, an order has been confirmed. But whenever there's some sort of manipulation that can happen, especially with products or services, you want to make sure that you start with a proposal and manipulate that document and then invoice once it's been finalized. Okay. And because an invoice is a document of income, it's really important to know that Ivy's reporting process is and anything involving your taxes, whether it's your taxes liability report, your transactions report, or your project tracker profitability report, those will only pull information on items that have been invoiced. Because again, it's an official document of income. So you are only paying taxes on items that you are creating invoices for. So remember that whenever you're doing reporting on IV, it's all about invoicing, especially as it pertains to your taxes. Okay. So let me just take a quick break. Ellie, have any questions come in that pertain to what we just talked about? I know I will be covering questions a little bit at the end, but while this is fresh in your minds, I do want to see if there's anything that I can touch on in a little bit further detail.
So we have a question from Carrie.
Carrie's asking a question.
Carrie wants to know, is there a way to show the client tax in IV on the invoice without having to pay the tax again if you have already paid tax on an item that was purchased?
That's a great question. So let me just look at it again. Show client tax on IV on invoice without having to pay tax again if you already paid tax on an item that was purchased. So one thing that we are working on right now, and it should be released in the next, one thing that our product team is really working on right now are accounting improvements. And we are working on a vendor tax feature, which is essentially going to allow you to determine which vendors you already paid taxes for in your vendor library. So any retail vendors, if you are purchasing from Restoration Hardware or Wayfair, and you'll be able to differentiate on the line item whether the vendor has collected tax or not, and better able to do reporting there. So right now there is a workaround. I will go ahead and include that in my email to you on how to show that. But we are working on an official vendor tax feature that should be released in the next few weeks, which I'm really excited about.
We have a question from Bailey.
Bailey's asking a question. Would you recommend making a separate proposal for each item in a room? Rug, couch, everything, or keeping one proposal with everything per room? I would absolutely recommend creating one proposal per room, especially if you are trying to budget per room and understand what the spend is per room. I've also seen people create proposals for specific, like furniture budget or furniture proposal, lighting proposal, cabinet proposal. So it really depends on what you prefer. But what's important to know is I would not create a proposal for one specific item. The whole idea here is that you are still able to manage everything within one proposal. You can always create groups if you want to group everything together, like furniture for one room, lighting for one room. But definitely I would say it would probably just make the most sense to have everything originate from one proposal and create your purchase orders from there. Okay, so Tracy, I love that you come to the webinars. I love seeing your name every week. So on the subject of not manipulating invoices, if we have an exchange, what is the best way to show documentation? Returns, then showing a credit, then credit applied to a new item. Great question, Tracy. So the best way, and let me actually go into this right now in how to handle returns. So this is one instance where you might need to manipulate an invoice, especially if it pertained to a purchase that was made in a specific period. So the best way to show a return would be, and the best way to create, and the only way to create a credit on Ivy is to change the value, to lessen the value of a paid document on Ivy. So I'm going to do that for this invoice. I'm just for example purposes, I'm going to record the full payment here so that we have it. And all I need to do once this payment has been recorded is go back and edit. And you can edit on the proposal level. You can also edit on the invoice. Because this is a return, I would probably do the documentation on the invoice itself. Because again, you did collect that money in that period. So you're not necessarily adjusting how much money or, the taxes that were paid. It's I think it's fine. But again, if you want to double check with your bookkeeper on that. But what I'm going to do here is I'm creating a credit for a returned item. So there are a couple different ways to do this. You have, I would say, 3 different ways that you can mark a return. The first, you can add a line item called return. I can simply create a product, and if I don't already have one here, yeah, I have a product in my library called return, where I can add all of the relevant details here. So I can say, let's say these baskets were returned, Mercado store baskets, and I can equate this return to the negative cost that was associated here. So negative $95 with that 40% markup with a shipping cost of, let me see if, not negative 400. I meant to do negative 40. Well, that's up to you, however you'd want to do that. So this is one way, is to add a return line item, but I'm going to not do that because personally, it's also easy for you to simply zero out the cost of the unit right over here, reflecting that change, reflecting that lesser balance in this line item. So this is another way to do it, is zeroing out. And then you can always edit the description here to say on 8/16, returned due to defect. And then the last thing that you can do is simply delete the line item. However, I don't like that option because it basically deletes any record of this purchase. So I would personally zero it out or add a line item that said return for the negative amount. Once you save this, you'll get a pop-up notification. You're about to reduce the paid balance by $146. Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes. And this is how credits work in Ivy. A credit is, lives within this project. Again, Ivy is a project-based system. So you are now able to apply this credit to an upcoming invoice as a payment. So I can see over here, if I click see details, 2 things. I'm gonna zoom in right over here. 1 second. And you'll see the applied payments that I took on this invoice. There's a line over here that says credited from invoice, which means that at some point, $121 was reduced from this invoice. So that's what was credited. This payment that I originally received, $121 of it became a credit. And same thing over here from this total payment, because there was a balance, it was $146. The remaining balance of that credit came from my second payment. So let me show you what it looks like in the project itself. I'm going to go back into the CP remodel, click on credits and retainers. And right over here, I have a credit. I see the original payment amounts and the 2 credits that I received. My total credit balance is that amount that we had reduced the invoice. And next time I go to pay an invoice, let me actually show you what it looks like. You can use that credit to pay for an invoice. So I'm going to go into an invoice I have right over here, click add new payment. You'll see that it says, note, you have available credits and retainers that can be applied when I am recording a payment. Toggle over to record received payment and apply the credit. I have $146.30 available, so I'm going to apply that full credit as the payment on this other invoice. Okay? Tracy, I hope that helped. One thing I want to talk about, which I mentioned a little bit earlier on, is when should you start with an invoice? When, we talk about proposals. Proposals are documents that you can manipulate. They are items that the cost is subject to change. The cost is not necessarily final. But there are times when you want to start with an invoice. And that's because these are items that are either final in cost, they're not going to change. It could be if you're getting reimbursed for accessories that you bought at Home Goods, let's say, or if you're creating a time billing invoice, or if you're billing for your services. Those costs are set. They are not necessarily adjustable, negotiable. So any sort of reimbursable expense, time billing invoice, and your design fees, those are all things that you could probably start just at an invoice straight away, because once again, those costs are not going to be manipulated. So one thing that I was talking about earlier, which I just want to articulate and show you, is we were talking about connected documents, right? How important it is to start with a proposal and then move on to POs and then the invoice. And we also talked about room tags. So I want to show you where you could see both of those items really comes in. And that's going to be in the project tracker. So the project tracker is a bird's eye view of everything going on within your project. We have a lot of videos on best practices. We have a 5-minute video clip in our help center, and I also did an hour-long in-depth webinar about the project tracker deep dive. So make sure to check those out if you have any other questions. But I'm a nerd, and this is my favorite part of Ivy is this project tracker. So what I want to just articulate to you is where it's so important to use those room tags for a project and also the connected documents, because the project tracker basically gives you an understanding of a product across its entire life cycle. And like I mentioned before, with the project tracker, you can utilize essentially to create budgets per room. So one way that you can do this is by filtering down using this little T button right over here. And using these filters right over here, you can filter products and services that have been approved or draft items or declined. In this case, I'm just going to do approved products and services. And I want to see everything for the master bedroom. So all I need to do is click on the column filter button, and I can filter this down by room. I see right over here, master bedroom, all of the different items that I have, any services that I've associated with the master bedroom. I can see the bird's eye view of the master bedroom. And if I select these items, I can actually export this as an FF&E schedule or into Excel, which will allow me to crunch the numbers. So really having the customization and the ability to export this into Excel will allow you to, it will give you that extra step in being able to create those budgets. But one thing I wanted to show you is when I talked about connected documents, the importance of it is really to be able to understand the product and where it is in its life cycle. So here we have that rug from Leloy. I could see the status, it's on a PO. And as I scroll across, I'm trying to go slowly because I know this sometimes freezes. As I scroll across over here, this is where the linked documents are so essential, because you have a single line item and you can see where it's been within your project and what the status of those documents are. I could see the proposal, it's invoiced. I could see the invoice, which has been paid. I could see the PO, which has also been paid. The estimated ship date that we had added because our rep told us 6 weeks, I added it right over here. And I'm also able to track all of my different delivery, receiving, installation information on that same line item. A lot of the times, and like, let me just go back to when we were talking about proposals and POs, a lot of the times people are like, why do I have multiple items in my project tracker, the same item multiple times? And I'll take a look and I'll say, it's because you started with the PO. You can't connect your PO to your proposal retroactively. And there's a reason for this. Again, the best practice here is you should never be paying out of pocket for items that you are buying for your clients. You should always collect that payment up front. So start with the proposal. Even if you don't know the cost, just add that item to the proposal, convert it to a PO, And that way you will have this consistency across your whole project. You will have the line item with all 3 items. Look at how nice that looks, where you could see the documents and the status of those documents. And you can even filter this down at that point to understand, what are my POs that haven't been paid yet? What are my partially paid invoices that I need to collect payment on? You can really take advantage of this project tracker by using linked documents, by using room tags. So this is really the way that I would recommend doing it. Start with the proposal, even if you don't know the total cost. Edit the proposal if you need to, but most importantly, collect that payment, create your POs no matter what, and convert items to an invoice only when you know the final cost, or at other points, only when you know the final cost and you don't need to manipulate it. The last question I want to go over is what I'll see a lot of designers ask is, at what point what does closing a purchase order mean? Good question. Let's go back to our purchase order list. And this is a personal preference. Again, everything that I'm saying right now is my recommended, me, Sivan, not Ivy, me. This is my recommended workflow according to all of the designers that I've talked to. You can close a PO, and this is what other designers will do as well, once the item's been delivered. That's it. It's been paid for. You don't need to worry about it anymore. It's installed. Nothing to worry about. This is where you can mark it as closed. So that Loloi rug has been installed. My client loves it. She's freaking out. Great. Mark it as closed. No need for me to worry about this anymore. It's done. Okay. So I would love to open the floor to questions. Again, setting yourself up for success on Ivy is pretty easy, as long as you understand the recommended workflows and how to take advantage of it. If you do have any questions, by the way, that I haven't gone over, please make sure to email your dedicated account manager at support@ivy.co. And also join our webinars, join our weekly webinars. Next week, I'm hosting a advanced Ivy Q&A. I will send you all the link to that, and as well as a link to this recording so you could share it with your entire team. But for next week's Ivy Q&A, I'm also requesting that you submit questions ahead of time so that I can answer them. So it's basically going to be an hour-long Q&A session. So tune in, see if your questions get answered. And in the meantime, if you have any specific questions about your account, please email support@ivy.co to connect with your dedicated account manager. Kristen is asking, if you edit a shipping on a PO, does that edit carry over to the proposal, or should the edit be done in the proposal, which would then automatically carry over to the PO? Great question, Kristen. I think I might have answered this. The shipping will not, once the items have been separated onto different documents, even though those documents are linked, they will not affect one another. So you want to make sure you'll have to retroactively go back and edit the proposal, which is exactly what we did in our workflow. We had it on the PO and then we added it on the proposal. Another way that you can do this, by the way, is an easier way perhaps would be to, if you haven't recorded a payment on that PO, you can delete the PO and then you can recreate the PO directly. Okay, so let me rewind. If you get a completely different cost, shipping, whatever it is, from your vendor, you haven't recorded a payment, you can go ahead, edit the proposal, make those changes on the proposal itself, and then recreate the POs from the proposal, and everything will be updated that way. So either you can edit both, or you can delete the PO, edit the proposal, recreate the PO. Kim is asking, using the Clipper tool, will the client be able to see the manufacturer? No, there are fields that are automatically hidden from your clients. And the way that you can think about this is anything that will allow your clients to shop you, we hide. The unit cost, the markup percentage, the vendor is not shown, the SKU, manufacturer, MSRP is only shown if you want to show a discount, but the SKU, manufacturer, and vendor and markup and unit costs are automatically hidden from your client. So anything pertaining to the materials, the dimensions, the finish, those will all show up if you've added them because they pertain to the item itself. Tamara, good question. Can you edit a PO after it's been paid? That's a little bit tricky, but basically because it won't allow you to edit it won't allow you to edit it if it will change the value of the payment. So you would actually have to delete or edit the payment first and then edit the PO. So the best way to do that is if it's a manual payment that you've made on a purchase order, right over here, you can actually delete it or edit it and then go back and edit the document. So if this has been paid for $425 and I need to go edit it, add an item, for example, I won't be able to do that. I'll need to edit the payment first. Katie, can you explain why we do POs from proposals and not invoices? We usually don't do purchase orders until our clients have paid, and we have paid our clients. And we have our clients pay invoices, not proposals, as proposals aren't booked as income, but invoices are. Katie, this is a personal preference. Again, this is something that I recommend doing because sometimes prices are subject to change, especially when you actually create your PO. So you want to make sure this is just a recommendation that I'm making, is to collect that money up front from your client. If you do collect payment from your client on the invoice phase, no problem. Get approval on the proposal, collect payment on the invoice, and create your POs. The important thing here for best practices is to make sure that you are collecting payment, whether that's on the proposal or the invoice, instead of paying out of pocket and creating the PO first. So it's totally a personal preference, but my recommendation is proposal, PO, proposal, invoice, personally. Jenica is asking, how would you suggest assigning rooms for items such as door handles that will be used in rooms all over the house? It looks like we can only assign one room per line item, but creating a proposal line item for each door handle does not seem efficient. You're right, it's not. If you do have those hardware pieces that are used in multiple rooms, I would create a room called whole house or hardware or but whole house, because especially if you're like budgeting per room and you're talking about hardware handles, then perhaps that doesn't make sense to, to me, it would make more sense to just simply create a room, whole house, and incorporate that into the entire cost of the project. How do you change or edit an item for vendor description, purchase order information once an item is already in draft form? We would like to edit all of those fields when we have them in draft form. So first of all, if you need to ever edit a product, you can always do so directly in the product library. And in draft form, the draft form are accessible, the draft items are accessible directly on the project tracker, but there are certain fields that you can edit on the project tracker, and one of them is not the vendor description. So I would personally recommend, in that case, editing the item from the library. I want to think about that for a second. So let me come back to that. I just need to think about what would be the best practice. And if anything, Lisa, I will email you as well. Any other questions? So, and see that there are a lot of questions. Kim Hoger is asking how to access the Clipper tool. You can always download the Clipper by clicking on Product Clipper right over here in the top right-hand corner, and it'll take you to the Google Chrome extension. Okay, so Lisa Schaefer is asking, when you create a PO without sending to a vendor, how do you change the status to sent and know that it has been ordered? The only way that it would show as sent is if it was actually sent via Ivy. So if you're not sending it to your vendor, perhaps you can send it to yourself or to your expediter via Ivy, just to have that status show as sent, if that makes it easier. A lot of the times paid for some of those designers will equal sent or you can always mark it in the project tracker under your notes that an item has that the order has been placed. I know eventually our product team wants to make updates to all of our grids, which would be our project tracker included, and we have some ideas on how to show that item status as well. Okay, so I don't want to run longer than an hour. Oh, Kim Spirit, you're asking, this is something that you asked me as well by email before this. On the link where it shows the proposal, invoice, and POs, is it possible to show the vendor names when there are several POs to attach? It's hard to know which one goes to which vendor. I totally hear you. I actually did pass that on directly to Helena, so fingers crossed that will, that's an improvement that we can add, but I totally feel you on that pain point. And then somebody, Hala, is asking, what's the process of accepting client's credit card? How would you pay the vendor and how would you collect the markup? So Hala, the best way to accept a client's credit card is by enabling online payments in the proposal or the invoice phase. So, and you want to make sure to also make sure that your account is set up to take online payments. So you can do that. The administrator on the account is the only one that can access this tab, but you would want to access the payments tab, connect your bank account, and once you do that, you can send any document for payment. So in order to send a document for payment, I'm going to simply go into a proposal that I have. And again, you can do this for proposals or invoices. I'm going to go to one that's open, click send proposal. And you'll see here that all I need to do here is allow deposit payments. I can select whether to charge client transaction fee, and I can also select whether I'm taking a credit card or bank transfer payment. Credit card and bank transfer are 3% credit card fee, and then bank transfer is 1.2%. And this is why it's important to create a PO, because you're asking about how would you collect the markup? Well, you're collecting the markup on the documents that show the markup. You're collecting it on the proposal or the invoice. And this is why it's important to create your PO, because your PO is going to show your unit cost. So your PO actually is what will show you, is what will allow you to see your profit from your markup, whether that's shipping markup or whether that's product markup or services markup, whatever it is, you need to create that PO in order to show that markup, in order to show that that's profit. Because otherwise, what it's looking like, if I'm not creating a purchase order, it's looking like I'm collecting $264, putting it into my pocket. Once I create that PO, I'll actually know that I am only making $120, in fact, not all $264. So that's where it's important. You want to collect the payment on the proposal, on the invoice. Let me see if I have, oh, Lisa, great question. With services, I take multiple payments over the course of a project. For example, I may have 4 payments for a service. Ivy only allows 1 deposit payment and then the balance has to be paid. Are there best practices on handling that? It's very confusing for a client to pay a proposal with a deposit and then try to take money from them to pay a proposal with a retainer. Okay, well, my best practice was actually going to be to create a retainer for that. So that's my suggestion to you. So what I would recommend doing in that case is collecting a payment. If you ever want to take payment in multiple phases, for example, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, I would simply create a retainer for those services. So what I would do here is click credits and retainers, request new retainer. And here I can call this like services retainer, for example, and add my retainer amount, $1,200. And then now I know that going forward on that proposal, once I've collected this retainer, I can go ahead and record that payment specifically for services if that's the way that you prefer to work. But this is the best practice I would recommend for any time you want to take multiple payments across a project. A retainer, in my opinion, is the way to go because it allows you to collect a sum of money and apply it as you wish.